I had always wanted to get away from the noise, to find some hidden place where the world couldn't reach me. So when I found the cabin listing deep within the snowy mountains, it felt like a calling. The ad was simple, isolated, peaceful, perfect for those who seek true silence. It was exactly what I needed. I packed my things, left my buzzing city life behind, and headed into the white unknown. The drive up the mountain was longer and lonelier than I had anticipated. The further I went, the narrower the roads became, until finally the trees swallowed the sky and the snowbanks rose higher than my car. My GPS flickered, then died altogether, leaving me following vague written directions. A crooked wooden sign pointed the way. Whispering Hollow, 3 miles. As I pulled up, the cabin appeared like a shadow against the snow. It looked older than in the pictures. Logs weathered gray, roof sagging slightly under the heavy snow. It was so quiet that I could hear the blood rushing through my ears. No birds, no wind, just nothing. I stepped out of the car, my boots sinking deep into the snow. The cold bit through my jacket instantly. I fumbled with the keys, my breath making small clouds as I unlocked the door. The wooden door groaned loudly as it swung open. The sound too loud in the absolute stillness. Inside, the cabin smelled of old wood and cold stone. A fireplace sat unused at the far end. A threadbare rug stretched across the creaking floorboards. There was a small kitchen, a sitting area with an ancient-looking armchair, and a staircase leading to a dark loft above. It was exactly what I had wanted. Isolation in its purest form. I unpacked quickly, setting my bag by the foot of the stairs. My phone had no service, but that was expected. I had brought a few books, a journal, some canned food. I figured I'd light a fire, make some tea, and spend the evening lost in my thoughts. But even as I settled in, something felt off. It wasn't anything I could explain, just a prickling on the back of my neck, like unseen eyes were studying me. I shook it off. I was tired from the drive. My mind was just playing tricks on me. As night crept in, the temperature plummeted. I fed the fire and curled up in the armchair with a blanket and a book. Hours must have passed. The flames had died down to glowing embers when I first heard it. A faint tapping. At first I thought it was just ice shifting on the roof, but then it came again, more deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the window. I sat frozen, the book slipping from my lap. The tapping stopped. I stared at the window, but the glass was frosted over, showing only the blurred outline of the night beyond. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a branch knocked loose in the wind. Maybe. But there was no wind. Trying to calm myself, I stood up, walking over to the window. My breath fogged the glass as I leaned close. I wiped away a small patch with my sleeve. There was nothing there. Only the endless white of the snowy woods. Shadows just stretched across the snow where the trees stood crooked and black. I shivered, suddenly feeling exposed, vulnerable. I pulled the curtains closed. Later, as I tried to sleep, every little sound seemed magnified, the creak of the old wood, the whisper of snow slipping from the roof. I told myself I was safe. The nearest human being was probably miles away. That was the whole point, wasn't it? No people, no distractions, just me and the mountains. Still, long after I closed my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was standing just outside the cabin. Watching, waiting. The night pressed against the cabin like a living thing. Even with the fire burning low and the heavy blankets wrapped around me, I couldn't find any real warmth. Sleep came in fitful snatches, each one broken by the smallest creak or groan of the old wood. It was some time past midnight when I woke to the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow outside. At first, I thought it must have been part of a dream. I held my breath, straining my ears. Nothing, only silence so thick it hummed in my head. I rolled over, pulling the blanket tighter around me. But just as my eyes fluttered shut, I heard it again. Slow, heavy steps, moving from one side of the cabin to the other, as if someone was circling it. My heart pounded against my ribs. I sat up slowly, every instinct in me screaming to stay still. I reached for the flashlight I had left on the side table, but my fingers were clumsy, trembling. The light flicked on, cutting a pale beam through the darkness. I didn't want to look, but some terrible, stubborn part of me made me crawl toward the window. I peeled back a sliver of the curtain and pressed my eye to the glass. Nothing, just the snow, glittering like crushed glass under the thin sliver of moonlight. And then I saw it. A single set of footprints, leading from the tree line straight to the cabin. They stopped just beneath the window where I stood. I couldn't see anyone out there, but the prints were fresh, crisp. Whoever, or whatever, had made them was still close. I jerked away from the window, heart racing so fast I felt dizzy. I told myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe a lost hiker, maybe someone who needed help. I even considered calling out, but the thought of drawing attention to myself made my throat close up. Hours seemed to drag by with agonizing slowness. I must have drifted into a light, uneasy sleep, because when the noise started again, it took me a moment to understand what I was hearing. Knocking, slow, deliberate. Not at the door this time, at the walls. It came from different sides of the cabin, random and disjointed. Knock, 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 first from the left wall, then the back, then somewhere near the loft upstairs. It made no sense. There were no walkways, no stairs outside to reach the upper walls. Yet the sounds persisted, mocking my logic. I sat frozen on the floor, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. The fire had burned down to embers again, casting the room in shifting shadows. I knew I should get up, build the fire back up, but I couldn't move. The knocking wasn't the worst part anymore. It was the whispering that followed. At first it was faint, barely more than the sound of the wind, but it grew steadily louder. I couldn't make out the words, if there were even words at all. But the tone was unmistakable, urgent, hungry. I slammed my hands over my ears, rocking back and forth like a child, but the whispers slipped through, curling around my thoughts, filling my head with images I didn't want to see. The cabin engulfed in snow, the walls caving in, a figure standing over me, its face blank and pale. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized I had to get out of there. Staying meant dying, or worse. I stumbled to my feet, nearly tripping over the rug. My boots were still by the door. If I could just make it to the car. A loud thud against the door stopped me cold. Not a knock this time. A full-body slam, as if someone had thrown themselves against it. Again it came, the door rattling on its hinges. Dust fell from the ceiling. I backed away slowly, the flashlight shaking in my hand. I remembered the lock. It was old, a flimsy bolt that had seemed enough earlier but now looked laughably weak. Another slam. A thin crack formed along the edge of the wood. Without thinking, I bolted up the narrow staircase to the loft. I had no plan, no weapon, nothing. The loft was dark and cramped, the low ceiling forcing me to crouch. In the corner, hidden under a musty tarp, I found a small battered trunk. The noises downstairs intensified, scraping, pounding, like claws against the wood. My breath came in shallow gasps as I fumbled with the latch on the trunk. It popped open with a creak that sounded deafening. Inside were papers, old and yellowed with age. A journal lay on top, the leather cracked and peeling. I flipped it open with shaking fingers. The handwriting was frantic, almost illegible, but the words leapt off the page. It comes in the snow. It waits in the dark. It wears the faces of those you lost. Never open the door, no matter what it says, no matter how much it sounds like someone you know. Tears blurred my vision. Another crash downstairs, louder than before. I could hear something dragging itself across the floor now, scraping against the wood, sniffing at the air. Then my mother's voice, calling my name, soft, broken, pleading. My mother, who had been dead for 3 years. I clamped my hands over my mouth to stifle the scream building in my throat. I shut my eyes tightly, clutching the journal against my chest like a shield. And I waited, as the thing outside searched for a way in. I don't know how long I sat there, curled up in the dark, listening to the thing mimic my mother's voice. It started as soft sobs, turning into desperate cries, then angry pounding. The door downstairs shook on its hinges, but it somehow held. For now, I knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. Morning felt like a distant fantasy, and deep down, I wasn't sure the sun could even reach this cursed place. Every minute I spent in the loft, the whispers grew louder inside my head, threading through my thoughts, making it harder to hold on to what was real. I needed to move. I forced myself to my feet, the journal still clutched tightly against my chest. Every board under me groaned like it wanted to give me away. I crawled toward the tiny window at the far end of the loft. It was frosted over, the wood swollen and stiff with cold. I pushed, shoved, slammed my shoulder against it. It creaked but didn't budge. The thing downstairs must have heard, because a shriek tore through the cabin. A sound that had no right being human, and the walls seemed to pulse with it. I didn't have time to be careful. I grabbed a broken piece of wood from the floor and smashed it against the window. The glass cracked, shards raining down into the snow below. Cold air blasted into the loft, but it smelled cleaner, freer than anything inside the cabin. Without thinking, I swung my legs through the broken frame, feeling the jagged edges scrape against my jeans. The snow outside was deep and merciless, but it would have to be better than whatever waited for me inside. I jumped. The landing knocked the breath from my lungs. I lay there for a second, stunned, staring up at the swirling gray sky. Then I heard it, the door finally giving way, splintering into pieces. Heavy footsteps rushed out onto the porch above me. I scrambled to my feet, slipping and sliding, as I ran for the car. My boots punched through the crusted snow, each step feeling like it took hours. I didn't dare look back. I knew if I saw what was chasing me, I might never move again. My hands were numb by the time I fumbled the car door open. I threw myself inside, slamming the lock down. The keys were in my pocket, thank God, and I jammed them into the ignition with shaking fingers. The engine groaned, but didn't catch. Behind me, something moved through the trees, fast, too fast. I turned the key again, muttering broken prayers under my breath. This time, the engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. I didn't even think. I threw it into reverse, tires spinning on the icy ground, then gunned it down the narrow path. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of something stepping out into the clearing. Tall, twisted. Its face was wrong, blurred, shifting. At first it looked like my mother, then like a stranger, then something else entirely. The trees whipped past me in a white blur as I sped down the mountain. The road was treacherous, but fear made me reckless. I didn't care if I slid off the edge. I just needed to get as far away as possible. Only when the cabin disappeared from view did the whispers in my head begin to fade. Only when the first sliver of dawn touched the horizon did I start to believe I might survive the night. But even now, far away from that cursed mountain, I sometimes hear knocking at my window late at night. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I swear I can still hear my mother's voice calling my name from somewhere deep in the snow.